Okay, hello. Again, I am extending from 350 onward. So, as you have seen that Wordsworth is talking about the spiritual growth, how he as a child experienced life, and he was having a very close association with nature, and he thinks that nature in many ways accomplishes the soul of man by dissolving all sorts of contradictions which are latent in the nature of man, and finally it brings the synthesis over there, the function that is that is assigned to imagination in for making poetry. The same sort of function is being performed here by nature or divinity to make a person become grown up to face the universe. That is the last line. More palpable as best might suit her aim. It does things in a secret way as it suits to nature. Okay. Then one summer evening, then he is recounting the excursion or the adventurous kind of act that he has performed one evening, and he makes the statement that once upon a time he stealthily took the boat from its harbor and rowed on the boat and sailed it in the deeper sea, and he went far across in the sea, and after going in the middle of the after going in the middle of the river, he found that the cliff is getting larger, and it became a kind of, it dominated his imagination for a long time, and he was afraid, and from there when he was returning, he found that that cliff is actually getting larger and larger, and he was astonished by the appearance of the cliff, and this journey was very adventurous and very dangerous in a way. And when he came back and he went there to the harbor, and he harbored the boat over there, and he got back, and for many days and nights he was haunted by that image of the cliff getting enlarged and following him. So somewhere nature is having this kind of a mysterious working also. So the mysterious and mystic way of nature is being recounted by the poet, and these lines are very important. After that I am going to read, because 350 lines we have already done, so most of the time explanations are asked only from up to these lines, but still since the entire book one is prescribed, so the important lines which are there I will be explaining, and I will be moving ahead. Okay, so he says that a little boat tied to a willow tree, he this way recounts this story and moves on, and in the middle, after line number 380, small circles glittering idly in the moon, you read the lines. After 380 there is a line, with trembling oars I turned, and through the silent water stole my way back to the covert of the willow tree. So he was moving towards the willow tree, the place where from where he started his boating, and he put the boat over there. There in her morning place I left my bark, and mooring place where the boat is harbored. So he there in her mooring place I left my bark, and through the meadows homeward went in grave and serious mood But after I had seen the spectacle for many days, my brain worked with dim and undetermined sense of unknown modes of being over my thoughts. So it became a kind of dominant imagination memory for a great number of times to come, and he was haunted by it. There hung a darkness, call it solitude or blank desertion. There hang a kind of darkness there. No familiar shapes remained, no pleasant images of tree. Oh, all the pleasant images, and his memory was entirely filled with that kind of mystical experience, mysterious experience that he had there. I would like to quote that lines. I dipped my oars into the silent lake, and as I rose upon the stroke, my boat went heaving through the water like a swan. Uh, when from behind that craggy steep, till then, the horizon bound a huge peak, black and huge, as if with voluntary power instinct up. Upreared its head. I struck and struck again. So this is the mystical experience that he is talking about, and after that he became obsessed with that memory for a long time, and he forgot all the beautiful and pleasant memories that he had. Okay, leaving a bit, I will come to the next important lines. Wisdom and spirit of the universe. He addresses nature, and he says that nature, you are the wisdom and spirit of the universe. Thou soul that are the eternity of thought, that givest to forms and images a breath. You are the whole soul. You are the caretaker. At the same time, you are the creator of everything. And he says that gives to forms and images. You provide forms and images, and breath and everlasting motion. So all these things are created and gifted by nature. Nature is here equal to God. So he is in a way addressing nature and celebrating its power. Nature is very powerful. By day or starlight, thus from my first dawn of childhood, didst thou intertwine for me the passions that build up our human soul. You have fitted passion in me for human soul. At the same time, not with the mean and vulgar works of man, but with the high objects, with enduring things. Not only the vulgar things, you also have gifted me great things, great attitudes, good attitudes, you can say. But with the objects, with enduring things, with life and nature, purifying thus the elements of feeling of a thought. And it is you who has been instrumental in giving me a feeling, purifying the elements of feeling and of thought, and sanctifying by such discipline both pain and fear. You have given me pain, you have given me fear, until we recognize a grandeur. By pain in life we sometimes face pain and fear, and that also enriches our soul. That also gives us accomplishment. Like corona time is there and we are confined to our homes, and this time is also going to give us some sort of benefit later on in the coming time, and we will derive its pleasure later on. Okay. So purifying thus the elements of feelings and of thoughts, and sanctifying by such discipline both pain and fear, until we recognize a grandeur in the beatings of the heart. Somewhere these lines are very deep actually. Beatings of the, here he is talking about the breath. You know, breath, meditation. In meditation what happens? A fixed an object is fixed there, and you concentrate in your mind about that object, and you try to see, try to concentrate upon your breath, how you are inhaling and exhaling your breath, and that image is the image of God. That is called meditation, and lots of concentration is needed. Means if you are a great practitioner, you would be hardly able to concentrate for 2 minutes. For 2 minutes concentration, it requires plenty of practice. At least 1 year practice is needed. So he is of the opinion that you, means nature, or you can say the divine element, the divinity, sometimes give us difficult situations, and out of difficult situations we learn, and ultimately you discipline discipline human being in a way that we are able to have the grandeur in the beating of the heart. When a man realizes the grandeur of the beating of the heart, he grows to be a seer. Who is a seer? Like Buddha, like Ramakrishna Paramhans, Vivekanand. All those people who are the seers, those who are people of great wisdom, only they can understand recognize, they can recognize and understand the grandeur of the beatings of the heart, how the heart beats. That is about breath, the rhythm that is there, that is felt in sadhana. That is sadhana. Actually, the Rishi Parampara. In Rishi Parampara, sadhana used to be there. That is looking inward. How? Because it is supposed that inside our body there is entire universe. The entire universe is there inside our body. It's just a matter of understanding. If you can develop an understanding, you can perceive the entire things within you. So that thing is being referred here, because Wordsworth is very close to our non-dualistic ideas. I have referred, and he is a great mystic, and he is a pantheist who observes, who feels the presence of God in every object of this universe, right? So he says that nature gives us, it is because of nature we are having passion, desire, lots of human weaknesses are there, and it harmonizes those discordant elements, and in a way accomplishes the human soul, and up to that level that we are able to recognize the grandeur of our breathing, right? And when we realize the grandeur of our breathing, we become a seer. So nor was this fellowship a grandeur, nor was this fellowship vouchsafed to me with stinted kindness, and I am very much, I have watched it, I have been a witness to it, and I am very grateful to your kindness. I am very grateful to God. You can remember Tagore, who says that in one salutation to thee, he is feeling very much obliged that God has given me birth in such a beautiful place, and he has given us 5 organic sensibilities, 5 organic senses by which we can experience the grandeur of this world. And what else is needed? Nothing else is needed. No point to be frustrated, or no point to be sorry if you are having 5 organic senses working, and you are born in such a beautiful world. And at the time of his death, when Tagore was asked, would you like to say something? He said that God gave me birth in such a wonderful world, and so many things were there, so many beautiful aspects of this world was there, but I could understand a very little bit. I wanted some more time to experience, to know some more things which are there, the beauty of the world, right? So that is, and Tagore, if you go by the details, you will find that he is the most voluminous, most fertile writer. He has written dramas, poems in Bangla. He has translated it in English, and many essays and a novel also. So he is all in all a great seer and thinker. And it was his idea that this world is so wonderful, and every one of us must be very grateful, to God that He has given us birth here in this world. So this same line is there, same idea is there, that nature has provided us a great opportunity by giving us this life, and by giving us accomplishment of soul. In November days, then he says that when vapors rolling down the valleys made a lonely scene more lonesome among woods at noon and mid the calm of summer night. So again he is describing about the nature, and is loitering about when the margin of the trembling lake beneath the gloomy hills, homeward I went in solitude. Such intercourse was mine. Mine was it in the fields both day and night, and by the waters all summer long. So he was obsessed with the idea of the power of nature, right? Power of nature is very powerful force that is being realized by the poet. And in the frosty season, then he recounts his experience of the frosty season, what happens in the winter season. Was set and visible for many a mile. The cottage windows blazed. Again he says that when everybody used to go for sleep, he used to go for wandering in the forest, and he used to experience the wonderful starlit sky and all that, and he used to derive lots of pleasure out of it. And woodland pleasures, the resounding horn, the pack loud chiming, and the hunted hare. So through the darkness and the cold we flew. He is talking about his friends, and not a voice was idle with the din smitten. The experience that he has got in the winter season, going out in the forest, that he is recounting. That is not that important. That fled away flying still before me gleamed upon the grassy plain, and oftentimes, again I am leaving that line up to 460, and then ye perchance presences of nature in the sky and on the earth, ye visions of the hills and souls of lonely places, can I think a vulgar hope was yours when ye employed such ministry, when ye through many a year haunting me thus among my boys' sports. He is talking about that. What was the design of nature? It is said that God has his own design, and man is placed, man is having a role in that design. That role he is talking about, that what kind of design the nature might be having about my role, why I was made to move around the earth and the forest and in the river. Was there some secret kind of planning of divinity, of divine, of nature, to place me in a situation where I should be surrounded by these hills and dales and mountains and rivers and crags and all these things? So he says, a vulgar hope was yours when ye employed such ministry, when ye through many a year hunting me thus among my boys' sports, on caves and trees, upon the woods and hills, impressed upon all forms of characters. So why this thing? Why these things surrounded me? I think the poet, since he is a great believer in power of nature, so he is thinking that some sort of design would be there behind it. Oh danger, of danger a desire, and thus did make the surface of the universe earth with triumph and delight, with hope and fear, work like a sea. So, why this triumph and universal earth? He says that of danger or desire. There is sometimes danger in our life, sometimes desire, and thus did make the surface of the universal earth with triumph and delight. Universal earth is full of triumph. Sometimes we win and we celebrate, and delight is there with hope and fear. Hope is also there, fear is also there. Work like a sea. So, what is the design? What is the planning of nature behind all these activities, behind all these things? Not uselessly employed might I pursue. Then he realizes that I am certainly a part of the design. So it is not useless, it is not nothing, not for nothing that I am placed in this situation of exercise and play. Through every change of exercise and play to which the year did summon us in his delightful round. So I used to enjoy every play and every sort of sport that was coming my way. We were a noisy crew. Then he says that I, along with my friends, we were very crazy and very noisy children. The sun in heaven beheld not vales more beautiful than ours. The sun in heaven beheld not vales more beautiful than ours, nor saw a band in happiness and joy richer or worthier of the ground they trod. We were very active, moving and sporty boys, and richer or worthier of the ground they trod. And the place where we were born, that was the richest place, the best place of the world. I could record with no reluctant voice the woods of autumn. Again he recounts the story of his boy's days, how he used to go to the forest. All the seasons he is mentioning, and he is saying that he has got the experience of all these seasons to go into the rocks and hills and dales and enjoy the beauty of nature, and he thinks that these are all happening because of certain secret mission, secret design of God. Again the line number 500, because 640 lines are there in all, so we will be completing it. Ye lowly cottage wherein we dwelt, a ministration of your own ministration of your own was yours. So you were administering us. You, nature or God, was taking care and letting everything happen around us. Can I forget you being as you were, so beautiful among the pleasant fields in which nature, he is addressing nature, that you, nature, you were so beautiful, in which ye stood, or can I have forget the plain and seemly countenance with which ye dealt out your plain comforts, yet had ye delights and exaltations of your own. So nature is having its own delight and its own exaltation. Nature is having its own way of working. Eager and never weary we pursued our home amusements. So he says that as children, he and his companions were never exhausted, and they were never tired. They used to pursue everything. This was all going and experiencing the nature was the home amusement for them. And at evening, when with pencil and smooth slate in square divisions parcelled out and all, with crosses and with ciphers scribbled over. So this way he is recounting entire experiences that he has gained as child, and we are coming to line number 550. Not sedulous as I have been to trace how nature by extrinsic passion first peopled the mind with forms sublime or fair. So nature fills our mind with sublime forms and air and made me love them, may I here omit. So many things I have been gifted by nature and I have loved them all, and I can omit it here. Omit how other pleasures have been mine and joys of subtler origin. So many pleasures were there that were his, the poet's pleasure, and some of the pleasures were having very subtle origin, subtle, very minute origin. May I hear, how I have felt, not seldom, even in that tempestuous time, those hallowed and pure motions of the sense. Hallowed and pure motions of the sense, which seem in their simplicity to own an intellectual charm. So, the not seldom, even that tempestuous time, even in the tempest, the poet was able to see the charm and the beauty and the intellectual charm that claim delight, which, if I err not, surely must belong to those first-born affinities that fit our own existence to existing things, and in our dawn of being constitute the bond of union between life and joy. So everything, whether it is a tempest, whether it is peacetime, tranquility, everything is having its own importance in nature. That he is trying to say. Yes, I remember when the changeful earth and twice 5 summers on my mind had stamped the faces of the moving year. When he became 10 years old boy, then what he experienced, he is saying, I held unconscious intercourse with beauty, old as creation. So at the age of 10, he experienced the beauty of the creation, drinking in a pure organic pleasure from the silver wreaths of curling mist from the level plain of waters colored by impending clouds. Right? So these lines are very important, and if you can have the knowledge of these things, you can write your answer as well as explanation. Thus, sands of Westmoreland, the name of the place, the creeks and bays of Cumbria's rocky limits, they can tell how, when the sea threw off his evening shade, how sea appeared in the evening time. That he is recounting, and we are coming to conclusion because the time is getting up. 640 lines are there. So, thus oft amid those fits of vulgar joy, which through all seasons on a child's pursuits are prompt attendants, mid that giddy bliss which like a tempest works along the blood and is forgotten, even when I felt gleams like the flashing of a shield, the earth and common face of nature speaks to me, rememberable things sometimes, it is true, by chance collisions and quaint accidents. So he is recounting all those experiences he has undergone in his childhood, and in the vulgar joy by its own weight varied itself out of our memory. The scenes which were a witness of that joy remained in their substantial lineaments depicted on the brain. Everything is well imprinted upon the memory of the poet, and he is able to describe that memory, and that is why it is said that he is a great imaginative poet. His imagination is very rich, fertile, and that is the stamp of it. Uh, Disowned by memory, ere the birth of spring planting my snowdrops among winter snows, nor will it seem to thee, O friend. Friend is here again coming for Coleridge. So prompt in sympathy that I have lengthened out with fond of feeble length, tongue a tedious tale. Meanwhile, my hope has been that I might fetch invigorating thoughts from former years. My attempt was to bring invigorating, very vigorous thoughts from past years. Meanwhile, might fix the wavering balance of my mind and happily meet reproaches too, whose power may spur me on, manhood now mature, to honorable toil. He says that from boyhood the journey has come to the maturity, and now I have attained manhood, and I am ready for honorable toil. And what toil he is going to do, he says that according to Wordsworth, the greatest thing one can do is to compose poem, because poetry writing is itself a very arduous, very great thing. May spur me on in manhood now mature to honorable toil, yet should these hopes prove vain, and thus should neither I taught to understand myself nor thou to know with better knowledge how the heart was framed. I couldn't understand how the heart was framed, how we are made of what composition we are made of. There is a line in Shakespeare, Tempest, of what stuff we are composed of. So that is very secret. Of him thou lovest, need I dread from thee harsh judgments. If the song be loath to quit those recollected hours that have the charm of visionary things, those lovely forms and sweet sensations that throw back our life and almost make remotest in fancy a visible scene on which the sun is shining. So this way he is he has addressed Coleridge and tried to say about this song, because every poet, every writer is very conscious and very anxious about the reaction of the critics and friends having written some work. So that kind of care is very visible in these lines. One end at least hath been attained. So finally, after writing this, poet says that at least he has been able to attain one end, one purpose has been solved. My mind hath been revived. He has been able to keep control over his creative flash, creative energy, and he is able to employ it, and he is now writing the poem. And if this genial mood desert me not, then again he makes this statement that if I am not devoid of this genial mood, the mood that I have been blessed by natural surrounding, if that mood continues, forthwith shall be brought down through later years the story of my life. So I can guarantee that if my mood is all right, and if grace is there, God's grace is there with me, I would be able to write about my life, further details of my life. The road lies plain before me. The road is lying plain before him. It's a theme single and determined bounds. This theme is single, it is having singularity because it is about himself, and it is determined bounds and he is very much committed, and hence I choose it rather at this time. That is why he has chosen this at this time, at this point of time, than work of ampler or more varied argument. And he is not he has not selected for any other argument, varied argument, where I might be discomfited at lost. He was scared that if he writes about some other themes, he can be having some discomfort and he can be lost. So he is giving reason why he chose to write this epic on about himself, why he made the theme of this epic to himself. And certain hopes are with me that to thee this labor will be welcome, honored friend. He is requesting to Coleridge that I feel you will understand and you will compliment, you will appreciate this attempt of mine. And this way, because Wordsworth and Coleridge, they were very closely associated and great friends. Even then, Wordsworth gave a lot of value to Coleridge, and Coleridge, although sometimes he is critical about his theories and all, it doesn't mean that he has any problem with Wordsworth on personal level. As far as the work is concerned, they are so much honest, that honesty is there, that intellectual, scholarly honesty is there, that even if they are friends and they feel something lacking in the work, they point it out. It is not like our tradition that if you like someone, you will praise that person, come what may come. And that kind of thing is not there. So he is addressing Coleridge, and he is expecting that he would certainly admire the attempt that Wordsworth has made in this work. It was a lengthy poem, 640 lines on video, very difficult to deal with. But anyhow, I tried to do as much as, if you go through all these videos and listen once or twice, you will be in a position to write the answer as well as, because the answer will be also from book 1 and explanation. So your job will be done, and the main poem starts after 250 lines, right? Before that, selection and rejection and about the beautiful scene of action is described. And this poem is written in iambic pentameter lines, that is iambic pentameter, 5 feet, 10 syllables, unstressed stressed pattern, simile and metaphor is there in plenty, and the style is the words are very simple, and rhythm is there. The rhythm is there in blank verse. Merit of blank verse you can go through, and you might be knowing, and that way I think I have completed, to say so. Not very precise, means not very deeply, but all in all I have completed it, and thank you for watching me.